Oh, Shane Mark. I don't think you can close the door.
What's that?
I don't think you're allowed to close the door in a public meeting.
Okay, I'll just keep it propped. So I was just trying to reduce it. I mean, there's nobody.
No, I don't blame you. Normally, there's people walking up and down the halls.
Okay. Can start? Duncan is online, okay. Welcome to the December 9th, 2024 meeting of the Mobility Planning and Coordination Committee. As a reminder, this meeting is being broadcast to the town's YouTube channel and also via Zoom and applicable, the meeting channel is being recorded for publication and later viewing and administrative purposes. I have not been notified that anybody else is recording the meeting. And we'll take a roll call for attendance, and Tim Bolger, chair, is present. Mo Handel,
Here.
Gus,
Present.
Steve, here, Paul,
Here.
and Duncan is online. Duncan,
Here.
and Tyler and Shane are also present. So first agenda item is to approve the minutes from October 17th and November 4th. We discussed October 17th before, but just a clerical error, I guess. We have to revote those. Are there any questions or comments on either of those?
The town clerk to post the meeting, but we only took one vote and it was on the minutes, so.
Will we approve the minutes of the 2 meetings in question?
Okay.
Second.
Second. And so we'll take a roll call vote. Chair votes aye. Mo,
Aye.
Gus,
Yes.
Steve, Paul,
Aye.
and Duncan.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. And moving on to the bike map. So we have the official map that was created by GIS department. Tyler, it looks pretty good. Is there any comments or questions or?
I have a couple questions about it.
Sure.
So, one thing as I was looking at this map was thinking about a future state where we have similar passage through the community for commuting as, say, the Red Line connector, what's that called, the Minuteman Trail
Okay.
north. Just from a climate perspective, the more that we can funnel people out of their cars towards public transportation, the better. As I look at the map, I think about like Dover and Medfield. I know Dover's not there yet, but at some point, the hope would be that Dover will be there, and Medfield, et cetera. And I'm not sure I see the pathway through. I see the pathway to our train station, but maybe not over into Newton. And I know that's a much tougher nut to crack. So maybe it's good to start with this and iterate. But that's just one comment. How do we get to a point where we're thinking in terms of multi-community transportation networks, not just within the transportation networks?
Yeah, I mean, I do, so I think if you follow, I think maybe Chestnut Street was left off of here. So if you look at the map,
Oh, so you're seeing it like Chestnut would continue down the spine?
Yeah. Continue, and then it
into-
would hit Highland Ave, and then Highland Ave technically now already turns into protected bike lanes at.
Yeah.
In Needham.
Webster.
At Webster, yeah. Getting over the highway is a little dicey, but there's the future community way that will kind of connect you there, and that will get you over to Newton.
Okay, so yeah, I think that probably is where I saw the interruption.
Yeah, and so I think that, and again, Highland Ave, we have the, first look at it here, but prioritizing an off-street kind of, or a, raise from the street level bike facility from the rail trail all the way to Newton, I think is on there. It's kind of.
So what
should be-
was the reason why it was left off between Marsh Road and Great Plain Ave?
I don't think the bike lane extends further beyond.
It's on my list for proposed bike lanes.
Where is
Yeah.
Marsh?
So there's a gap here.
So that's basically just like right by Camellas is where it kind of ends.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so by,
Marsh Road is like right where Roach Brothers is.
Roach Brothers, yeah, it's Roach Brothers to, you know, kind of the new project that we have.
Yeah, so that's part of the gap, you know, I guess I originally was thinking also like Bay Colony into the Needham Rail Trail, but I guess it would still make sense to go down Highland
Mhm.
as opposed to trying to find another route.
Right.
Unless you could get over to Maple somehow.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that it's already kind of set up because the rail trail will connect to
Yeah,
Chestnut Street at some point, and then so when you get to Chestnut Street,
right.
it should be a nice facility to take you to Highland Ave. Take you on Highland Ave, it takes you to Newton.
So it was your intention though, that all of the Chestnut Street into
Yes,
town center would be included, aspirational, not necessarily planned,
Correct.
but I would agree. I would think that that would connect the spine from Medfield through to Newton. And then you've got all of these spurs that come through. So in here, that little section right there.
Get an MBTA right of way issue on the junction, that's
yes,
part of the
I
problem.
think, but that, you know, James isn't here, but there's a feasibility study for bringing the rail trail down to Chestnut Street. I think that's,
There was a feasibility study completed. There were a couple options presented. Some of, there's a wetland area there over by the Hartney Graymont site, between Hartney Graymont and the there's a utility company property there. And basically the consultants priced out a couple of those alternatives, and that's kind of where the conversation was paused. But it is still on the select board's plan for to reevaluate and pursue it further.
probably a few years out. In,
But yeah, I agree that it kind of makes sense to funnel the network should have, a spine, a kind of main thoroughfare
Yeah.
going in every direction, and if we can lead the peripheral pathways back towards that, that's probably the best way.
Did you also, just having a hard time seeing it, but did you place the schools in here?
The schools are already marked. This is the same exact map as this map.
Oh, okay, it's these little yellow boxes.
Yeah, it
okay.
just has the colors are just overlaid on top of the
Okay, yeah.
that map.
And it generally looks like the bike paths are going by all the schools. Looks like maybe not quite to Newman.
yeah, quite the Newman is probably there is probably a gap there, I would say, between on Central Ave. I did not include that in my list. Mainly because that section of road is, I think,
It's dangerous.
narrow. I think it's narrow, so
Yeah.
the just probably a larger project and, the right of way is constrained.
Doesn't it apply also from Foster, I'm sorry. Right here, from Foster to.
Along
Croydon.
Central.
Yeah, that's another, that's just I think an omission that was made, because that was in my list as
Yeah, no,
well.
it's not so
Which
much.
section?
Between Boyden and
From-
Volante Farm,
yeah.
Forestry.
Yeah.
It might, I don't even, it may
There's
actually,
like a section there that it kind of, because my recollection was that once it gets to that light, the shoulder kind of,
it's,
as you're heading
No.
southbound, it kind of disappears.
yes, it disappears, somewhere in between there, it disappears. So there's
Yeah.
proposed on one side and then there's
Okay.
existing on the other.
Yeah. The green is the existing, so you're saying there should have probably been
Correct.
a,
Yeah, like,
Is Is it yellow or,
I actually don't know where, so I think
there's a legend at the
Yeah.
bottom of
Yeah,
the
it should be
map.
the yellow.
yeah, yellow is existing. I think so, because I'm pretty sure the bike lane ends at the satellites.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, there is also continue along North Hill, then it continues a shoulder, an established shoulder. Goes
Yeah.
all the way to Neuhoiden, I believe.
yeah, I only based the,
And it is not
Off
so much
of
a
Mark.
criticism, but I mean, even if you make it, as you just say, aspirational,
Yeah,
because, you know, you're showing this all the way green, and then you have a break. You know, there should be something identified.
Yeah, that one for sure, it's supposed to be on there, and the roadway, I think is wide enough too, it's pretty wide there.
Well,
I think it lacks the shoulder lacks the actual bike signal.
That's true.
Bike,
Yes.
symbol,
Mhm.
but other than that, I think
it's almost there.
it's almost there, yeah.
Yes.
For what's there now, like, if that's, you know, for a painted on-street bike lane.
yeah, so there would have to be, markings taking you through the intersection. At that location too, because it's kind of like a high conflict intersection, because you got people turning into Monty Farm. Going up towards Wellesley.
So I just think that section should be yellow proposed.
Yeah,
Here,
right.
it just was omitted.
What about, if we're on the proposed? What was the reason for leaving Central Ave south of Great Plain off?
Like when the bike lanes were being painted.
No, as a
Yeah.
proposed, like,
proposed.
is it
So
not?
it's based
suitable?
off my list.
Okay,
But
so you weren't thinking, I think you were thinking more community networks than.
yes, community networks in the right of way. It's pretty narrow there. And so it's. My list was more of like a,
Layups.
yes, low hanging fruit,
So to speak, yeah.
overused, but low hanging fruit. That section would be without doing like an extensive right of way change, I believe. So I omitted it. Doesn't mean that it shouldn't be omitted, I guess. I guess what we're here for.
You want two observations on this is that Central Ave and South Street are very heavily used cycling routes. I mean, we can call them whatever we want. Those are probably the two most heavily cycled roads in Needham. And there's no cycling infrastructure on them at all. In fact, South Street is better left avoided. I mean, I know at least 3 people who have now been struck by vehicles on South Street when they were on bikes, road bikes, going 15 to 20 miles per hour. I think this committee ought to think seriously about recommendations for those. I think they're probably complicated, to your point. But I would think that we would want to make a proposal at some point to the select board, town manager, town meeting, to do something more significant to protect the bikes that are going to be on those roads, whether we say that it's a bike network or not.
Yeah.
I mean, PMC goes right down Central Ave from Babson. So, you know, I know that's only one weekend a year, but a lot of people use that road as a practice route during the rest of the year.
Yeah,
And a lot of people are using parts of Central Ave now to avoid South Street because South Street is such a death trap for bikes.
I think
Central isn't easy either.
It's not, but South Street has literally no shoulder.
Right,
A lot of blind corners.
which means takings.
Make a very unpopular opinion here.
Yeah.
That that should be a one-way street,
Yeah, I
or
think
at least
that,
parts of it.
yeah, I mean,
it's also a scenic road, so it
Scenic road,
requires
yeah, that's
planning board approval for
Yeah.
modifications. I think that the central, like, I don't think that there was a resistance to extending it further as much as it was the northern section is the section that has the closest proximity to the like more residential areas in the schools.
Right.
And they were kind of just, okay, let's start at Great Plain and go up. I think it was more about, you know, I think was the thinking. South of that, I think there's probably the width, but there is quite a bit of volume and trucks.
Right.
So you would have, you know, I don't know if it would be as simple as just painting the lanes. I think you need some sort of like protection.
And I mean, that might be a very long range project. But the other thing that comes up a lot is, you know, you hear a lot from the folks who live down in Charles River that there's no sidewalks down there, so there's no places for their kids to walk or ride bikes. And there's really no way to get to town unless you get into a car.
It's on Charles River.
Charles River Street, yeah,
Yeah.
Charles River Street.
That's the long one that goes out.
Connects, you know, kind of along their border.
Okay.
So, and then there's the new children's center on Central Ave now too. And eventually pickleball and skateboard ramps
Where was that supposed to be?
at, was that Claxton Field? It's across from
Claxton.
Mhm.
So we're putting a lot of people there and a lot of kids there, and there's a lot of cyclists there, and it's still just a road for cars.
Is there a way to connect to that? Isn't there like a trail through the forest there, or is that just like for mountain biking?
There is, like, you can, for example, get off the Bay Colony Rail Trail and roll over to Robinwood Ave,
Yeah, you can kind of meander through there.
and there's a lot of other.
Mark
This is the
Street,
town forest right here.
Yeah, this is number 12.
and Mark, you know, Mark Tree is on there as well, and it's a little bit more populated area.
Yeah.
It's, you know, if we're able to create some sort of like neighborhood or a bike boulevard to get people from over here to that corner.
Right.
Definitely, you know, there's a gap. It's clear to see here that there's,
Yeah.
even when you look at all of it, right, like, you know, there's a gap in this corner. So maybe we should
Yeah.
aspirationally,
That's what I'm thinking.
which
It might be a
maybe,
lower tier, but proposed, you know, I would propose that Central Ave be considered a bike corridor pretty much from Medfield to Newton. And somehow. I don't know how that would be done. I really don't know how that would be done, but
It's wide enough in Dover and Medfield once you get out of Dover Center,
Yeah.
but the other way, it's,
I think there's,
I bike that a
So
lot.
where are you saying extending down this way?
yes, I think it's Central Ave, which is this, you know, where the gap is, I guess.
right.
The bridge over the Charles is
So
deadly.
essentially you have people who come through Wellesley, Dover, Newton, down Central Ave or across South Street to get out to that Charles River, like the Red Wing Bay, and from there, all road cyclists diverge. But those two thoroughfares into that area right now, which go out there on a Saturday or any morning, you'll see dozens of cyclists going down those roads. And all of us doing a little bit of this before we get on our bikes. It's-
Yeah, I think it's a valid,
Yeah, as long as I hope there's an understanding that putting bike infrastructure, it's kind of similar to like when people say that there's a speeding problem and then they ask us to put crosswalks or something in. You know, the infrastructure doesn't necessarily make it safe, so we, you know, and I don't think that we're gonna, there's still going to be like a pretty high volume of traffic, especially at peak hours. And a good amount of that is truck traffic, so I think that it wouldn't just, it'd have to be a bigger project, and we have to be
Yes.
more creative about the protection, I
Yeah.
think.
I mean,
I don't think you could do it necessarily off-road anywhere in there, to be honest.
I mean,
Well, unless you could improve the bike trail and take it across that bridge from Dover to Medfield.
I think the plan is to take the bike trail down Fisher Street. I think it's a MassDOT project or.
It's also on the tip,
something.
yeah,
To bring us
Dover's
here.
more- and Dover's more open than they've ever been.
Yeah,
yeah, so the engineering is currently working on that bridge, with. So,
That would get traffic off the central, at least for a piece of it.
yeah. I mean, I think putting it on there is aspirationally, I think it's fine. It's fine. And it make, like, maybe even like a wider sidewalk, because there's only one sidewalk there, so like if you were gonna redo the sidewalk and make it wide enough and call it a mixed-use path or something, it may be an option, but again, very, big projects.
Any,
Not right away.
what about other opportunity, I mean, like if we took South Street, for example. From High Rock, where it diverges on High Rock to Chestnut Street, that tends to be where I see most people almost get hit or get hit. Is there, again, unpopular,
Yeah.
is there any possibility of making that into a one-way street, or is that just?
Wait, which section are you talking
So
about?
right where it diverges with High Rock,
Oh, here?
yeah.
The triangular, this
So from High Rock down to Chestnut Street.
South High Rock Chestnut is the triangle.
This section here.
No, so on South Street.
Oh, this
South-
section.
Yeah, it's that little, just to Chestnut Street.
There's a
Just to
triangle.
Chestnut. Oh, I
Just
see.
that
what
high
you're
There's a
saying.
triangle, it's green, yellow and
Yeah.
black.
But I'm thinking just that South Street section. That's the side where you have walls on one side of the road and no shoulder on the other side of the road.
Yeah, I mean,
And I just don't know any way of making that safer, either making it a one-way or putting the speed limit at 10.
one way
Yeah.
increases the traffic speed.
It does.
I think that whole situation is not really up to DPW.
Yeah.
I think it's a planning board discussion. I think
Okay.
it's political in nature.
Would this committee make a referral to another board to examine the issue?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
It's perfectly legitimate.
Yeah, I think that maybe that is a larger traffic calming project in general, probably to make, to make South Street safer for everybody.
So the people that live on this section are gonna have feelings
Oh, absolutely.
I
about,
get a planning board member on that section.
Feelings as
Yeah.
big as their houses.
No, I absolutely, I could be a.
so maybe that person is
On High Rock.
Conversation.
on High Rock. Yeah. So, because I feel like it might be, there needs to be an advocate that connects with the planning board, and that's kind of, like, but if there's, some people that live there that support it, I think that would probably be the,
Well, Justin's
Sorry.
on the planning
Yeah,
board.
so.
Right,
maybe
where does he
you
live?
I could take an
talk
action.
to-
He lives in that, he lives near High Rock somewhere, but he can certainly convey that.
Yeah, so.
Why don't I take an action to talk to Justin and see what his feelings are about it, whether or not he thinks it's something that could be added to the backlog of issues that the planning board looks at.
Well, traffic management also looks at safety issues.
That's true.
So, and he's
That's true. So he's got
at
both,
Duncan.
he's got both committees that would be relevant, right?
Yeah,
yeah, I think he might just know where to go with it.
Yes.
Okay.
Alright.
Thanks for
Any
being
other,
here.
yeah, thank you. Any other comments?
One thing I want to note, this should be green, and we will fix that. This is,
That's the one I just went in, right?
yeah, this is the one that just went in, and it actually extends up to, so this is proposed, and then this section is
Oh,
built.
just empty, yeah. Okay.
So this is actually, I guess you can consider this still orange. The only thing is that, getting under the bridge would be a little tricky, but there should be a green right here.
Yeah, so the Dedham Ave path, that was an off-street path that I found on it's on MassDOT, it's tracking it for, I don't know why, but it's there. And
Yeah, it
goes
seems
from
to-
South Street, I think it's meant to be like, maybe a mixed-use path or something along Dedham Street from South Street to DeFazio.
Yeah,
And then the orange, like the rest of Dedham Ave, probably would have been included. I don't think I intended to have proposed bike lanes on Dedham Ave in that section where it's.
there is a bike
Double.
lane from the railroad to West.
Correct.
yeah, so I guess
There's
this
an
would just be the
enforcement
pink.
issue on that
Just the
bike
pink.
lane.
Yeah,
Just a pick and then move the yellow or.
yeah,
actually-
the pink, but the pink only gets you here though.
Right,
but-
yeah.
But there is an enforcement issue from the railroad to Webster, which is that people put their private trash collection
In the lane,
containers in the lane.
yeah, I mean,
They've done it a couple times, but I don't think it's been that big of an issue. I think it's, I
We
think
shouldn't
they've
allow
moved
it.
Out to a little bit or they've put it back in, because it happened before, but I haven't noticed it in like.
I have seen one person parked in it,
Okay, yeah, there's,
but
I don't think the public knows that you can't park in a bike lane. I learned about it here, so,
I mean, I would. I was about to say I would think it would be obvious, but I probably not.
no.
it's, I think the design, right, the one on Dedham Ave, it has a buffer that is striped a different way, that doesn't look like a parking space.
Yeah, but that's only 2 feet space, 2 feet. or 3
Right, so
feet
that
wide.
makes it uncomfortable to park a car there, because that doesn't look like a parking space, whereas, you know, like maybe on Greendale, like those are just wide and the buffer doesn't have any core striping in it, so it kind of looks more like a parking space, so people are more likely to park there.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this either in TSC or maybe it was the joint meeting.
Yeah.
But it's definitely the enforcement angle starts with the police and what they are,
Well, there's also education.
right?
So to the extent that we can get the public to understand what some of these things are.
I think it's probably best to push out the information before
Yeah,
you start.
you don't want to start enforcing without letting people know
Yeah,
that you gotta do.
So I can work on talking to you about that.
I have a couple more questions.
Oh, yeah,
on that.
sure.
So you left Greendale Ave out. Well, from the temp TBS all the way down to Kendrick. Is there a reason, is it not suitable? That
Which part here? This?
Greendale Ave, basically from Kendrick Street where, you know, diverges over the bridge all the way up to Temple Beth Shalom.
Oh, that's Gould Street, is that?
No, that's
It's
Greendale.
Greendale and
So you're talking like
High
this,
Street, like where
Yeah.
High Street, and then to
this little
Greendale.
triangle here.
Is that not suitable for a community way, neighborhood way?
Seems a little, I mean, depending which direction you're going in, it seems a little duplicative, but if this happens, then
That's what I was looking at. If you get to there, then you're kind of, well, what do I do now?
Yeah, I
Right.
believe, probably when I wrote the spreadsheet, when I said High Street, I probably assumed that High Street was
Oh, yeah.
all the
a lot of
way,
people forget
uh,
that Greendale.
Greendale, High Street
Gotcha.
goes to Greendale.
So you might have been connecting it down to Kendrick.
Yeah,
so so this purple should have
Yeah,
probably
Greendale
gone over
area.
here.
Okay, if that change is made, I don't have any.
yeah, I think that's, again, I think that was on the list of
Yeah.
very complicated projects that,
It's a big hill, so some people
it's a
might
hill,
avoid it
yeah, and I
anyway.
think that, you know, a lot of those, getting through those neighborhoods down here are pretty difficult projects.
Yeah. And the other thing
You'd want it to go
comment,
here.
Yeah, you're gonna get down to Kendrick Street, basically, and that gives you a couple different ways to get across each of those neighborhoods.
yeah, or go down to Dedham. The other, I think it's a good idea to avoid Gold Street as a bike route. It's already, traffic is pretty bad in there.
Cool.
Gold Street, but I think if you have people funneling up to Gold Street from Hunting Road, and then you have eventually the rail trail, I think you have to accommodate for people taking that shortcut onto the rail trail.
You mean this section here?
Yeah,
Just that, yeah, because I don't think people are gonna backtrack up to Webster to get onto a rail trail at that point.
I also do think that maybe another talking point with Justin is that the Muzzy site,
That might
some
be,
of those plans had
you're right.
bike lanes that went around their building, which would be pretty close to the end of this, so,
Okay, so that might be an off-street, not on-street.
yes.
Yeah.
I think this section would either, fold it into that project or this project.
Right.
Okay,
Um,
yes,
But we should probably still mark it, just to memorialize it.
Okay.
I'll have to look at the actual conditions.
No, I think this is a great map.
but and if we go that far with it, then it seems like there's a gap, you know, between Central and, you know, Mills Field and, but
Well,
we we do have Webster Street, we have Pine Grove, they're all kind of close.
I
Oh, I
think the
see.
assumption is once you get into the neighborhoods are low traffic, low speeds.
Yeah,
Right?
like you could go, around where Mills Field is, but
So were you saying that, Stephen, because speeds are a little high here, or like
It's
saying,
narrow, there are speeds, it's a big cut through for traffic.
yeah,
And I know that it's a hot button item for that neighborhood already.
commercial,
There's a lot of commercial,
people coming in and out,
yeah, there is commercial there, that's,
people from Newton getting to the highway, I think.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a lot of traffic, but kind of not enough traffic. So, it's,
I'm trying to take the desired path
yeah,
philosophy, which is where are the cyclists going today? If they're going down to Central, they tend to go down Webster. They don't cut over to Gold and go down Gold
yeah, right.
to get to Central.
yeah, because you wouldn't. The only time in which you would do that is if you were going up Hunting.
But even then, if you were like cutting over to Wellesley, kind of feel like you still might keep zigzagging left to the Webster Street and
Yeah,
going up Gold. Gold's not a great ride, a great route for cycling.
Okay,
And it is just a high traffic street in a different way. Webster's high traffic, but it's wider.
but if we do have a rail trail there, I think you probably end up seeing a lot of different types of traffic.
Yeah, you get diversion too.
You get different types of bicyclists using the
Yes.
street to access that from the neighborhoods on the other side,
Yes,
probably.
More
So,
recreational.
yeah,
I'm looking at at Gould now, and the section between Highland and the rail trail gets a little narrow,
Yeah, it's like Wingate on the left and
Yeah.
former Muzzy on the right, right?
right?
But I do think Tim is right, that some of the plans that have been put forth for the redevelopment of the Muzzy site had trails
there's some
on property,
on property. Yeah.
which might be the best way through. Like if you had trails on property up to the rail trail. And that might be something to propose to the planning board and ZBA as something to push for.
Where is it?
So we'll add Gould Street from Highland Ave to the rail at least.
Maybe as an off.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Proposed off.
I think off-road is maybe like. It's probably like raised bike lane or protected bike lane or something. But I don't think we're really categorizing them quite yet. I think off-trail is really just meant to be like in space that is like nowhere near. A street.
Oh, like I said, that's what you're using the pink for.
Like off trail, yeah, the rail trail, there's a path proposed near Defies, it's kind of.
So you
off the
would
street.
put yellow here as sort of like a non-specific.
Yeah, I don't think we're discussing, because a lot of these on-street lanes should be protected or raised or separated or buffered, but I think there's, they're not necessarily, I would call them off the street.
Yeah, I think we put it in gold or yellow, whatever.
Yeah, all the way.
I think to the trail, but
Okay.
because I think it actually is an easier lift, just extending it there for, like, it's easier to make that connection than it is to continue, because as you continue, there's like basically no shoulder and there's like a ton of vegetation.
Is there a sidewalk on Gould Street? Does it end at Mills?
There's a sidewalk on the side, there's a sidewalk on this side.
It goes the whole length?
It's, honestly, it doesn't look, like an accessible sidewalk, but it is a sidewalk.
I think that there may be, like wider sidewalks in mixed use territory that are, like 8 or 10 feet wide. if there's an opportunity to fix the sidewalk and make it kind of wide enough that gets, to do bike traffic.
That's a good point. We could expand from the sidewalk rather than pinch from the other direction.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different options probably to take, and we're not.
Cause I mean, if we could kill two birds with one stone, make this accessible, cause it looks like it's like 4 feet wide, maybe.
Yeah. And so I think maybe even in our design guide, we may tackle some of those bike facilities, and if some of those are, you know, like mixed-use paths, which are wider sidewalks to handle bike traffic, it's comfortable for people who aren't experienced, and that may make sense in a street like that, where you could fix the sidewalk and make up bike.
Yeah,
facilities.
that would be like a contraflow. You'd have to have, cause you would come up from Hunting. And then you'd have to navigate to the far side of the street, to continue along the sidewalk side.
Yeah,
Which isn't, I'm not saying
Yeah.
that's like a bad thing necessarily. It's
Sure.
just-
I think, you know, where some option is in there, I think marking it is, you know, talking about that, and designing it.
Yeah,
When it comes up
yeah,
for
we don't have to decide
for the
now.
project, right, yeah. It can happen there, so,
Yeah, so do we think we should take it all the way up to Central or?
I don't think it, holds us back in any way to leave it out.
Yeah, okay.
No
Consensus
problem.
on
I have no
that?
problem leaving it out.
Yeah, I think it's the majority of the utility is the connection to the
The
trail.
trail,
That was the reason I raised it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
and,
What's going on with that pink around the town?
that's the off-street paths around, Memorial Fields.
Oh, okay.
It
Well, they're
looks
there.
odd, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It does.
I left them in there so that if there is either a field renovation or, you know, something changes in the field, that access for bikes is added through the park, because you can, you know, you can get there from Fair Oaks Park and Warren Street and Pickering, and you can ride through the park
Great place for kids to ride.
to be out, you know, to kind of get to the library and the high school and all those areas without having to mix with traffic.
Yeah.
You can park your bike in there and walk across the street. There's a
Yeah, it makes sense.
crosswalk to get to the, Tilbury Farm. So that's why I left that in there. It's kind of a remark for maintaining that. There's also one at Hillside, behind Hillside, there's a sidewalk through the woods.
Oh, yeah.
Just marking it there so that if something ever happens, that it's on our list. It's there so that it's maintained. Kept there.
Now that you bring that up, I'm not sure if you're even allowed to be on it, the boardwalk that goes around Newman. Is that a no cycling zone? Or is it
It
allowed?
doesn't really go anywhere, it just goes around in a loop.
Yeah, but it's,
Yeah.
I was out there one day and discovered that you could go all the way around the field and then into the woods and come back out the other side. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a little
I never,
recreational.
Yeah.
But I don't know if
never
it's
seen
legal.
it.
Yeah.
It's quite nice.
There's
Yeah, it's a gem.
anything keeping out of there, but I don't think it's a part of doesn't bring you anywhere. Just,
Yeah.
you know, it's a good-
You're focusing more on transportation than recreation.
Correct.
Connectivity.
Connectivity.
Okay, so we'll,
So I'll have those changes made up. I think we wanted to move this eventually into like, publicly available. Yeah, something posted on the website. So I guess the question is, how do we want that to work? Because, you know, this is a static map, which that's easy to link to. If we wanted something more advanced than that, that'd be a longer term project that we'd have to work on with GIS.
Is there a set of steps that we have to go through first before putting it out to the public in terms of?
I mean, we would want sort of to run it up the flagpole and make sure that we're not contradicting any priorities by leadership, I would think, but.
One thing is probably state.
I'm just curious if this is going to be overlaid or if people can on their own overlay it with, Google Earth map or whatever and start asking their own questions about right of way width and abutting conditions. Is that something that this would facilitate?
So the option is that it would be kind of similar to the construction activities map that we've been developing. It would just be like an interactive map where these lines would be overlaid on, essentially a GIS layer. And you'd be able to zoom in and see, it wouldn't be that, well, maybe it, depends what we want it to be, but.
Well, I'm not pushing the idea of doing that. I'm just thinking that, so many sort of local issues lie behind some of the gaps we're going to be closing. We want to show something on the map, but one of the reasons the link may not be there yet is sort of a, physical or right of way issue.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, we can try to do our due diligence on DPW side. If there's obvious problems in a particular location, then that's something that we probably want to talk about. Also keep in mind that there will be some version of an interactive map associated with the street design guide once that is undertaken. So we don't need to duplicate that information. This should be focused on exactly what, like, this is the aspirational map.
Yeah.
Like if there's things indicated in orange here and, DPW, we go out there and we're like, oh, this will never work, then that's probably something that the group wants to know and we should talk through, but, I think we just wanted like a first cut through, make some of these changes. And, this won't be the last time we're talking about it.
there are a lot of issues digging into like each different project, which at the time I think could come up in design and.
Yeah, we don't have to like vet every little
Right,
thing.
Yeah, like,
Well, the title, maybe then, you may want to think about the title, just calling it bicycle network, that seemed to imply something, or would it be something under review, or,
Yeah, like it,
the
proposed or.
proposed, or,
I also wonder if you probably need to bring it to the select board and get their approval and endorsement on it before really pushing it much further. If they
Right.
come out and they say, yeah, well, we don't have any room in the capital plan for 20 years.
Well, yeah, but I think it has to be, we made the map. Now for us, if there's anything that is, there's not enough width and we don't think it's really possible to go further or something like that. Those are things that we want to talk about and clear up before we go to select board, and then they say, why are you doing it? There's no way you can do it there.
Is that a lot of work to do like a due diligence on that?
No, I mean, a lot of these, like the purple is not, subject to the same kind of restrictions because we're not talking about dedicated on-street facilities, so. It's really these orange or yellow, areas. And, we can do a ride along and just go through and, if there are obvious issues, then we can note those and then, bring it back to the committee. But I think ultimately, that's where it starts, and then we kind of say, okay, let's run this up to leadership. Does this look kind of what you're thinking? If yes, then we can decide what to do from
Next
there,
steps,
like,
yeah.
you know, do we post it as a static image? Do we develop it further into an interactive?
I think maybe, because we have a bicycle plan now
Right,
that was adopted by somebody at some point
yeah,
years ago, and so
that's almost more work to update that.
to update that, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, just-
Well, I mean, I figured that like eventually this would be something that is like signed, codified, or, you know, signed in like some sort of plan is adopted by the select board
Right.
or some other committee. So like, you know, this is the first step, I think, towards making that document, which may be years away, but, you know, like, I think the Brookline one, you said, they started with a map and then they created this document that came out years
Yeah.
later. So
Is there like a design guidelines or something?
it's a bicycle network
It's not-
document.
They just
yeah.
started with only with a plan. Sure they did. But I'm just wondering, you know, like,
This is presumptive.
to me, that's for something, I don't, you know, say like say a 15-year vice plan or something like that.
Vision.
Vision, yeah, vision or something. I know, because once it gets out there, or if somebody
Yeah.
finds out there, then,
I like vision,
Yeah, vision is good. I
Yeah.
like
Because
vision.
Vision is good.
because visions can change.
It's aspirational.
Um, I think there was, there was one thing that I didn't. Okay,
All right, so we'll renaming it the bicycle network vision, and we'll add the additional areas we made.
Yeah.
So then we'll move on to our next agenda item. Sidewalk maintenance plan and removal pilot. Tyler had sent around a chapter from where was it from the
the guide for
Chapter
maintaining
guideline.
active
yeah,
transportation infrastructure.
Federal Highway Administration.
This document.
is that the source?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Department of Transportation, Federal Highway, yeah.
Federal Highway Administration. This is like a larger document. This kind of talks generally about maintenance, kind of like the operational side of the street infrastructure. So one of the chapters is about funding, and that's Tim had sent this over, and I thought it was interesting because I saw some techniques or strategies on there that I've seen in other communities, but haven't really been discussed. Here we go. So if we want to pursue like the removal pilot way of doing things, the funding would either be, you know, we would kind of like set aside some of our dedicated funding to do this, to do these projects, in which case that might take us scaling back our scope of work for other areas. Or there's an independent funding source that is tied to the program specifically. So some of the different things they talk about, like essentially having like a betterment program or like an assessment or something where there's cost sharing involved. That's what I believe Newton does. And some other locations that I've seen. And then there's more more of like planning, a planning aspect of things, improvement districts. I don't think that's necessarily applicable for this, but community-wide assessments, I don't think that's gonna work.
Is that not, community-wide assessments are an option?
I mean, a community-wide assessment would be if town meeting voted to approve like a dedicated, that essentially would be, I mean,
Dedicated article. in the warrant.
Yeah.
yeah. But the way this is, the language here suggests like a tax, like a direct, like,
Well, what about, can we ever use Community Preservation Act funding for sidewalks? Or do it only go to buildings? Or imagine what sidewalks could fall under CPA.
Sidewalks, not recreation, not housing, not historical.
Walking's recreation.
I think you'd have a hard time getting that through the CPA, but it's worth the conversation.
I think it is if it's in the context of like a park or a school or something, but not a residential neighborhood that is only gonna benefit the people that.
So that either is, we go through the budgeting process and get a bigger line item for it. Or a separate warrant article. Dedicated funding. I don't know if there's federal or state funding that can be applied for as well.
Worth looking for that.
I'm just trying to picture how the conversation goes at town meeting where we say,
We want to.
we level funded the sidewalk maintenance program, but 15% of it's gonna go to sidewalk removal. Which means not only are you gonna end up with fewer sidewalks, we're also gonna redo fewer sidewalks.
Yeah.
I would.
But we're gonna be
I think we'd have an
maintaining
immediate-
fewer sidewalks as well.
Yeah, I think we have,
Improving some sidewalks.
but fewer sidewalks than if we
Fewer,
didn't
but
take
fewer
any out.
better sidewalks, so.
I think you would have a mutiny on that.
Having experienced the reduction of streetlights. You
Yes,
went to a meeting for that one?
I wasn't there.
Oh, my God.
Was it, and that's, some people are fine with no streetlights in front of their house.
I would love
Yeah.
not to have a streetlight anyway near my house.
But I wonder if we've exhausted, well, how far are we on this pilot proposal? Has it been endorsed by select board? Has it been?
No, so that's, we're talking about it now in kind of general terms. We had one sort of general discussion about this a few meetings ago. And we were focused more on like how it would actually work, like the program
Yeah.
and how to select where the pilot would take place. But I'm just saying, I think that an equally important part of this is if we were to do this, that may, like you said, that may impact our sidewalk budget substantially. So if people are expecting, the same output as we normally would have with that budget, then it might be going, that's kind of the problem inherent with improving residential sidewalk, because from an outside perspective, only that neighborhood is really benefiting. So why are you reducing
Right.
your sidewalk? You're spending a 30-year sidewalk budget on this one project on a street that I'll never use.
Right. I heard a lot this year about all of the required curb cuts for the ADA compliance. A lot of people, why are you spending all this money on curb cuts? We had curb cuts, they were fine. We need more sidewalks.
Yeah,
And I knew the issue, so I explained it to them, but it was not satisfactory. Now, if I had to tell them, oh yeah, we're pulling out, 100 yards of sidewalk in your neighborhood. But the good news is on the other side of town, they're gonna get a nice new sidewalk.
right. Well,
I
we're not,
don't know how that's gonna go.
we would be pulling out the sidewalk on the same
On
street.
the other side, it would be in the same street, yeah, it's
Yeah.
not taking it from here and over there, it's all, it would be on one street,
Yeah,
one
one
side.
street. Because other, that would not,
Yes,
we could
yeah.
not do that.
One side would get removed to improve the other side. I
Well,
guess.
the other thing is the people from whom it gets removed get more usable lawn.
Potentially.
Well, they could see it that way, or they could see it as
More
you're
Monticello.
taking away.
Yeah, the property values, because you don't have a sidewalk in your front of your house anymore. So
Some
there's a
people
lot of-
want it, some people don't. So-
If I've got mobility issues or little kids and I have to cross the street every time I want to go for a walk.
Do we have a, like an inventory of, or some sort of like list of the sidewalks, like that
That we use.
you need to fix that are in the renovation program?
Which
Yeah,
ones do we not need?
Yeah. so like,
I mean, yeah.
where's the priority for both, like,
So we have work orders, you know, like the C-click fix
Yeah,
system. We have work orders like stacks on stacks for the sidewalk outside of my house is terrible. And if we dropped everything else we were doing and only did those work orders, it would take us like multiple years to, like, if we did nothing else. It would probably take us like 10 to 15 years to repair it. But obviously we have all these other things that we have to work on too.
How much time has been spent on trying to find funding? Do you know, like, whether or not it's been exhausted? Or how do we get to this point where a pilot is being
So,
considered?
so the funding opportunities that are available are, applications are not gonna be attractive when you're putting in for a project on a residential street that isn't, near anything
Yeah.
that the state would consider to be, you know, this is not a high volume pedestrian area.
I'm thinking a little bit more broadly though, like in terms of like, and we met with whoever has been looking at this, met with finance committee, select board and said, you know, this is a major problem, we need to do something. There's two ways to do it. One is to shrink the network of sidewalks. Two is to dramatically increase funding and find funding sources. Some of that might be the general fund. I know a lot of people probably don't even know that we've been level funded on sidewalks for how long?
Well, it's, there's two different pots of money, so it. Yeah, I see what I see what you're saying. I think that, we also have to keep in mind, and I've said this before, that the staff, DPW staff only has so much capacity. Right? Like, so even if we got $1 million tomorrow, that doesn't necessarily mean we can do $1 million of work, for residential sidewalk.
Right.
So that's kind of why there's all these sort of, there's reasons why this has been kicked, the can's been kicked down the road, because there's constructability issues. We inherited a lot of the sidewalk from the original builders, original developers, and it wasn't built with the future in mind. We have a funding issue. We have the inherently divisive question of removing sidewalk. And like I said, it's not something that we'd easily be able to get outside funding to supplement, because they're low priority. They have been for so long that they're, not in good shape. So, I think there is value in going down the route of like doing this pilot program as a way to do it. But the funding aspect of it, I think people need to just keep in mind, because if we're doing, a whole street or a neighborhood of streets in a residential area, and we're talking like several 100 feet of sidewalk, that's like the majority of the sidewalk budget that we have for the year. So it's not an easy nut to crack.
Sidewalk tolls, that's the answer.
Sidewalk tolls. I was given permission to replace my sidewalk.
By the
Out of
town?
my own pocket.
I think that was mentioned at the select board meeting too, right? About having.
I just had to apply for a permit to dig up my sidewalk and repave it.
Did you do it?
I did it,
And
There you go.
Don't tell policy.
but I don't know that I don't know how sustainable that would be, and you'd end up with patchworks of your sidewalk.
Well, it was mentioned at the select board meeting, right? Like having developers or people fix sections of sidewalk as they
Through the street,
go along.
through the permitting
Yeah,
process.
as part of a project.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Should be part of the project.
I don't even think I
Yeah,
had to pay
sure.
the permit.
They're affecting the sidewalk when
They
they build
usually, I
the
mean, they
house.
usually do generally, but I don't know if that's enough to.
That's not gonna put a
It's not
huge
gonna-
dent. There's
Yeah,
not,
but that's not.
even with 100 tear downs, you're not gonna get far with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's their responsibility, but it's not an answer to this problem.
If the funding was not an issue, is the constraint on the capacity side, like, it's always constrained, or is it because we've had so much else going on in construction, road construction, building construction?
You mean departmental capacity?
Departmental capacity, yeah.
Yeah, so we have essentially 10 people and then contractors. Those 10 people aren't all doing one project at one time.
Right.
And contractors can't really work without supervision, because otherwise they'll take advantage of us essentially.
Yeah.
You know, we have to make sure they're doing things to our standards, that they're doing what they said they're gonna do. So, I don't think that that's going to change. You know, we have requested additional staff members. We have an open position now that we're trying to hire, struggling to hire for. And then we have another one requested for the next year's budget. But I think the sidewalk funding up until this point has gone towards the school walking routes, and the school walking routes are starting to get, they're pretty much, they're in a good, state of good repair. So this work would be kind of like shifted over to that program, but we would still need to do maintenance on like the more heavily traveled routes. But now that our up until this point, we've always said we do the sidewalk on the school walking routes. But now we've kind of reached the end of that list, at least for now. So it's like, how can that's why we're having this, why the committee's tasked with this. How do we make sure that we're trying to do this in a way that's fair and makes sense operationally? And that is, okay, the trade is you give away
To get.
one side of you to get. That's how to make it fair, right?
So it'd always be in the neighborhood.
Have
Yeah.
you, reached out to any neighborhoods, or how would you,
Well, we don't have
you
a
send
program.
like
Yeah,
a questionnaire, like, hey, do you, or do you want to talk, have you talked to anybody? Like, how do you talk to somebody in that whole neighborhood, and like, you know, you maybe on your 311 tickets, like all the neighbors are on one street, but it's a dead end road and they have two sidewalks. Is that somewhere where you can be like, okay, well, do you have a group of people where you could present to them a pilot program so that we could try it?
yeah, we just need a program.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you need at least 2/3, maybe more.
Well, I mean, I think you
of
need,
a street.
you need to start somewhere. So if there's a street where the neighbors are like, 311, my
Yeah.
sidewalk needs to be fixed, my sidewalk needs to be fixed, in that particular neighborhood
Yeah.
is a dead end street or a cul-de-sac and it has two sidewalks, and you kind of look at it and say, well, okay, we're willing to put you ahead on the sidewalk renovation program, but we'll be removing one side street, like, is that acceptable? And maybe it's a no, like.
Yeah, so that conversation is kind of what we haven't nailed down yet, is if it's like, we send out flyers, we hold a local like neighborhood meeting or something. Do people vote on it? Do because like with like the public street acceptance program process, they actually have to fit more than half of the people, half of the abutters on the street have to be in favor. Is that something we want to do for this? Is it just kind of anybody opposed? Like,
I think
how do we pick?
I think you'd have to have more than half, because one half of the street might be totally fine,
Yeah,
giving away the other half of the streets sidewalk.
but it
I
might
have
not
both
be split.
conditions on my street. I have a sidewalk on one side
Yeah.
and about a third of the way up the street it ends,
And then there's
it
some.
picks up on the other side.
Yeah,
And in the time I've lived there, I don't think I've ever heard anybody complain about the sidewalk situation.
That's a fairly busy street.
But most of the traffic on that street, pedestrian traffic, is not people who live on the street.
It seems like it might be worth seeing if you could get a public meeting just on sidewalks and if we fleshed out like 2 or 3 ideas for programs and get feedback,
That's a great idea. You could have a little workshop, people sit around a table and just
brainstorm.
brainstorm it.
We start with everybody, send in a 311.
It's a good idea.
Wouldn't there be town meeting members and part of that?
Say again?
Town meeting members be part of that?
Anybody, I think
Anybody.
we could just be an open
Because it
meeting.
may be a good start to them, because you don't have the whole neighborhood, just if you talk that they have a sense of what's going on in the
The
neighborhood.
town meeting members have a sense,
Okay, yeah, that's right.
ideally.
ideally, but not really.
I think that that's probably not
More
a
now
bad
than
idea.
before. Huh?
The Stephen, like, having a meeting, but, as long as we have a plan for how to keep it on the rails and not kind of like,
The
why
planning
didn't you
board,
fix
ha-
my sidewalk? Why didn't you fix my sidewalk? Why are you not doing concrete sidewalks in front of my house? Like, people have a lot of questions and I'm happy to answer them, but,
no, you do it facilitated.
Yeah.
Planning board has a lot of experience with this.
Yeah.
A lot of the zoning we've done in town, we've had workshops, and we put 10 people around the table with a facilitator.
mhm,
And
take questions or just,
they just kick
More
around,
discussion,
you have
more
some
discussion.
key questions you want everybody to discuss. And then each table presents what they've talked about and what they think. You have to, I mean, you have to be, it's gotta be well prepared before you do it. But it's very productive because people work off each other. And you get some ideas you didn't think about.
Typically, you start with like a presentation of the problem you're trying to solve.
Right.
And you might give them 2 or 3 potential solutions. And then you say, now we're gonna ask you guys to go gather around, discuss our potential solutions, give us some feedback on those potential solutions. And then maybe you have a portion of the meeting focused on additional brainstorming. But what you do is you steer it completely away from, this is my problem, I want my problem fixed.
Right.
It's more, this is a community-wide problem. It's very hard to solve. We're trying to solve it. We want your help in figuring out things that would work.
You can even vote the weighted voting on the potential issues and or solutions.
So you might, for example,
You get a
present
sense.
your trade a sidewalk to get a sidewalk, to get, like, one idea we have is the trade a sidewalk to get a sidewalk program. You're willing to give up one sidewalk, decommission it. Your other sidewalk will get raised in priority. That's one idea.
Yeah.
I don't know what another idea might be.
Lee Newman can give you
I
some
think
good
that's
advice.
the
on
idea.
that.
That is the
That's the
idea.
idea.
Yeah.
that is the idea, yeah. What,
The other idea is we taxed you guys a lot more.
Well, you make people part of the
Yeah.
solution
And we
rather
hire
than
more-
victims of the solution.
Yeah,
You
maybe-
get more cooperation.
yeah. Yeah, because I think before we were thinking about it in terms of like, okay, we're gonna do this program, we'll only talk to the people that this would affect. But,
Well, it
Maybe it
affects
makes
everybody,
sense.
unless it's a dead end street, it affects people from far and wide, because a lot of people walk now.
yeah, but they're
I
in
think-
residential.
Yeah, the streets that are targeted here are ones that are very unlikely to see people other than people in the neighborhood walking on them, because they're kind of out of the way of like a normal walk.
Even better, then you can have a targeted work group.
Are any of those down near Charles River Street? Because I think that's the noisiest area for getting new sidewalks.
Well, you've got one person who lives there who's very vocal about the sidewalk issues, that speaks at town meeting regularly about them.
Exactly. I mean, and that's the challenge. I mean, some of the easy places to decommission are the places that are already sidewalk poor.
Yes, yeah, I mean, I think it helps to have a idea of like where it would work.
So we have pilot locations,
Okay.
like in mind.
Yeah.
We've just been holding off because we didn't have anything nailed down beyond. This is what we would do, take away sidewalk on one side and
Would you
We-
take it away right away, or would you wait until it reaches the end of life?
No, it'd be one project. It would, because the same people would do it. Same people would be removing and installing or
So
rehabilitating.
that would.
How many streets are involved?
So what we were considering was basically doing like a neighborhood, so. Through kind of like a grouping of like 3 streets in
So
a neighborhood.
100 homes, 60 homes?
Yeah, so the area, one of the areas that we talked about. Let's see if I can find it. So we talked about doing like Blacksmith Drive, and then like Meadowbrook and Meadow Lane,
Oh.
like kind of like this.
Isn't that the heart of the no vote?
I don't know.
I think it is, but in any case, you could. I'm thinking off the top of my head, I don't know if you are too. Have a neighborhood meeting. Facilitated with tables. Putting 6 or 8 people at a table. Saying, this is what we think we have a problem doing, which is maintaining all these sidewalks. We don't have the means to do it. We think, based on other information, that there are some ways we can do it. Here are what they are. Take 15 minutes and react to each of these and tell us which is the most desirable from the perspective of your table and why.
Okay.
Then
So
you all come together and the facilitator from each table presents what the consensus was from that table. And then you take away that information and process it and then feed it back to the people and decide whether you want another meeting.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, how open-ended do we leave it in terms of, do we ask their opinion on? I mean, who's gonna say, we'll let you guys decide which side of the street it is versus,
I would
Yeah.
not say to them, we'll let you decide which side of the street it is. One way to do this is to determine which side would be best to do this on and eliminate the sidewalk on one side and maintain well the sidewalk on the
Yeah.
other. That's one alternative. Another alternative is to maintain these sidewalks, but it's gonna take us 20 years to get to your neighborhood.
yeah. Cause I think up until this point, we kind of were saying that we would decide based on constructability, we would decide which side beforehand.
Well, then you tell them, based on what your analysis is and why, we think this is more constructible than that side.
Right.
Tell us if we're wrong in terms of utility to the neighborhood.
Yeah,
And ask people to try to get out of their own particular parochial interest, but that's not gonna go away, but if they're talking to the neighbors. And there's a facilitator
Yeah.
at each, you have to have a facilitator at each table.
I think the other, along those lines is also asking that question, would you rather wait 20 years?
Yeah.
And keep your sidewalks,
It's a resource issue, really.
or do a trade? What you might find is some neighborhoods are like, I'm fine with this, because we walk in the street anyway.
right.
Yeah, you might have a different solution for each neighborhood.
But some neighborhoods will say, we'll gladly give up one side to get a new side. But I think the problem with that is that you might not solve your whole problem, which is that most everybody's gonna end up waiting 15 to 20 years. And I think that's what you're trying to get to, right?
What I'm saying is, yeah, like so say we have our budget and, if this is the way that it was being done. Okay, we're earmarking this portion of this budget for this program. The program is standardized, we have it's written down somewhere, this is how this is gonna work.
Yeah.
Then every year or however often we can get people to sign on, to get on board with it, that money is spent towards that. Or we kind of just like, we have like a short list and when time allows, when it lines up with construction season, we kind of make our way through the list. How do people's get their streets on the list is a question. Because as of now, we have a couple that we just think, okay, this is potentially a good candidate. But other people might hear about this and think, why isn't our street on this list? And then how do you prioritize that? So these are all questions that,
Yeah.
you know, it's tough to say.
Well, how do you make the determination with respect to neighborhoods on whether or not to pave a street in the neighborhood?
So streets are different because there's a safety, well, there's safety in both ways, but I
Yeah.
think
That's not a pointed question. I'm
Yeah.
curious. How do we make that decision?
based on
We
the,
don't ask the neighbors, do you want your street paved, do we?
no,
So,
so we have, you know, we have our condition scoring and sidewalk is a little different in the sense that we don't have a numerical rating system. We have like, there are segments and then they're rated good, very good, poor, whatever. It's just that currently we have enough funding to, on a rotating basis, pave roads on a cyclical basis to make sure that the network stays above a certain level of
Mhm.
state of good repair. We don't have that for the sidewalk, so that's kind of the difference. You know, because, so if we don't have enough to do that, how do we pick where we do go? It's,
So that's having two buckets, right? Like one is sidewalks and one is neighborhood sidewalks.
right,
And that program is separate. The other sidewalks, there's still money left for other sidewalks. Less of them, right? But those are done on a more as needed, condition wise, and then some
yeah,
are
it's like
done.
near schools, near parks, near the commercial zones,
But there needs to be another bucket for people who are in,
it would never be
would never
prioritized.
be prioritized.
Yeah.
So it's another point to let them know that, you know, if you're doing it based on, you know, data and facts, you know, you're at the end of the list. And so like this program helps you get way ahead.
Drop the line.
Drop the line, basically, yeah.
So I have a couple of thoughts. One is that it feels like the idea of the pilot is not well developed enough to really propose anything. It feels to me like it really needs to be like Mo was saying, get some citizens together, talk about it, find out what the reaction would be to an idea of trading one sidewalk for another. It might be, as Mo says, some communities might be very open to it. It might be such a bad idea, we kill it,
right,
right? And I feel like we're at that stage with an idea like this. I could be wrong. You may have already
you
gotten more.
can frame
feedback.
it with, we're trying to figure out a good way to do this.
And I just want to get
Would you
reaction.
be willing to come together in workshop to give us some feedback from a resident citizen perspective on what you think of the issue and what you think might be good ways to make that decision?
Right.
The other question I have as we're talking about this is, has any other community that we know about dealt with this issue? Can't be the only ones with this issue.
So that's part of the reason why why we were talking about the financing of it, because other communities do it in a way where if you want your residential sidewalk prioritized, there's cost, you have to chip in,
Betterment.
yeah.
Yeah. See,
And if we're trying to avoid that, then this is what we,
I don't know that we should have just avoided.
We've done betterments here.
Yeah.
We did it on,
I would think that we probably want to have all the tools on the table at some point. You know, like my mind is thinking spreadsheet. Okay, if we did trade your sidewalk for a sidewalk, how long would it take to clear a backlog and what would we spend on an annual basis over the course of the next 20 years? Better, if we told people to chip in and we knew there are models out there, and I don't know what the cost sharing model is, but let's say 10%, 20%, whatever it is. How would that work out? Third, we asked finance committee to double our funding on it and give us another FTE in DPW. How would that handle it?
right,
Maybe fourth is we put in a stabilization fund like we've done for a number of things. Which on
Bill-
an annual basis contributes a fixed amount. You've got your operating budget. But on a periodic basis, like fields, I think you know this, right? The fields sometimes funding goes up and down. We don't fund it like this through the operating budget. We put it in a stabilization fund. And then when we have capacity or an immediate need for a lot of spending, it's sitting there waiting for us.
Yeah,
So there could be like a few ways to do the financing. But it's almost like we should probably present the pros and cons of each of these, like what's it look like from a financial perspective, a staffing perspective, a clearing of the backlog perspective, and then political perspective, like who's, like, are people more willing to spend more money on taxes to clear the backlog in 10 years? Or are they fine waiting 20 years so they can keep their taxes low?
Right.
Or are they fine trading in? But I don't know that if we just go down that one route, I think we're gonna get a, why didn't you consider these other things?
Right, no, put them all on the table, why not?
Yeah.
And if we're talking about how we finance this, we should make sure we get a representative from the finance committee involved in this discussion.
Absolutely, yeah. Who over there is really familiar with the road stuff? Do we know? DPW, who's been the liaison for,
I don't
or
know,
maybe they rotate.
they have been rotating. I know the representatives for the parking budget, but I don't know if they would be the same people.
who was that? Cause it matters who. Truly does.
Barry?
Yeah, he's a reasonable person, he'd be a good person.
Barry and, what's the other person?
An unreasonable person could be a strong ally too, if they buy into what you're coming up with.
I think so. I mean, I think honestly,
Paul O'Connor.
this is an
He's
issue that
another
probably
reasonable person.
transcends.
Paul? Yeah.
I said this is an issue that everybody deals
Yeah.
with. So I think that anybody we had from over there who would want to look at this problem with us and try to get creative. I hope they know this problem exists, but
Yeah, I think there's value in trying to get reactions. I think that the only reason we hadn't done that up until this point is because we thought that it would be better to have a yes or no, like on a platter and somebody pick, because sometimes when you leave it, there's too many options, you don't really
yes.
get a consensus
Yeah.
either way, so I think we have to like focus it and
You need a clear statement of what the problem is, so people understand what you're trying to deal with. Then they become part of the solution,
Right.
when they discuss it.
yeah.
Especially if you're going to a neighborhood that they're already asking for new sidewalks, so you really get their opinion.
Yeah, so do we think it's better to hold like a local, like a community feedback session, or something that's like more general?
If you know the community you're looking for, the neighborhood,
Take those streets you had before,
do that.
Yeah,
use those streets because they have
manageable.
contained too, you know who you're dealing
Workshop.
with.
And it would actually be ideal if you could pick 2 or 3 neighborhoods that are far apart.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna have different perspectives on that.
Yeah, the number increases next year.
yeah, actually, that was one of the other things we were considering was if we do this program and only streets on one part of town are getting to
Yes,
skip the line, that's a problem.
that is a problem.
So that's another thing that is a factor.
You might consider, if you're doing this, then just do one workshop and try to get representation from across several areas.
Yeah,
Because then you can present it as a community-wide problem and have people talking to each other and saying, well, this is what would bother me, you know. or
Yeah.
This is what I would be find fairer, more fair.
Do you necessarily need to have exactly the same solution for each neighborhood? Is the other question, that I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know either. Question.
Somewhat consistent.
I just think
would
the
say.
funding needs to be consistent. You know, because if one neighborhood wants cost sharing and the other neighborhood doesn't, it's kind of tricky to
It's true.
do that.
And if one neighborhood has the means for cost sharing, they can buy up the budget.
Yeah. Yeah,
which would also be very
And
unfair.
then what happens if,
On the other hand, it frees up more money for the other neighborhoods.
But you could say like on an annual basis,
Oh, no.
we strive for.
Duncan's been
hand.
trying to talk this whole time and I didn't see
speak
his
up,
email.
Duncan.
Sorry, Duncan.
Oh, he's rejoining. It's a-
I got depanelized, but I have been listening to everything, and it sounds like you're on the right track. I like the neighborhood idea.
Okay.
What happens if, like, the neighborhood finds out about this program that's on a street that isn't really necessarily one that should be reduced, to one sidewalk? Sorry.
I think you might need to go and.
I got him.
So like, we've had this neighborhood that might work, but maybe some neighbors get together on like a busy road or something like, we want our sidewalk done.
Yeah,
We're willing to give away one of
right.
our side of the sidewalk but that's not a good choice.
Well, that might be,
That might not
if
be
people
fair.
want to participate in the program, that might be a good problem to have rather than,
Too many people trying to get in. I mean, you might have criteria, like in terms of your relative repair.
Yeah.
Could be like one criteria. This one's a very poor sidewalk. It's a high priority for us to replace. We have somebody wants to get in the program. That supersedes this one over here, which is just very good. They want to get in the program. You could put together criteria, but that could all be discussed in the workshop. Like, how do we decide between competing?
Yeah, what criteria do you want us to use?
yeah, I mean,
This-
our short list is generated based on constructability, really.
That's it.
I'm just curious whether, given the nature of the overall financial fiscal situation and how it is very different from what the highway side of it, is there some, one or two slide bullet piece that we could, offer as general information, just saying it doesn't work like the roads do, the streets do. The whole idea of, original developers, in fact, having created infrastructure which, there's no ongoing commitment to maintain. Is there some way to get that across without being confusing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think like Mo said, it makes sense to introduce the problem and how we got to this point. So that people have a fact pattern to work off of.
Right.
But leave the solutions a little more open-ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think we need to be prepared to answer the question, why can't we just make the sidewalk funding like the road funding? Why, if we haven't just been paying attention, why don't we start paying attention now and fix it?
Yeah,
I think, and to your point about that doesn't necessarily address the capacity. Deep staff capacity to do it or resource capacity to do it.
yeah, because I'm thinking about like if we had, if currently if we had an extra million
Yeah.
or whatever to perform sidewalk rehabilitation in addition to all of our existing our existing paving list and everything else, I'm not sure we could actually do it operationally.
Do you feel like you're at capacity or near capacity? Above
I think
capacity?
this past year, especially because we were down a position for the entire construction season, we couldn't find anyone to hire that met the qualifications. We were pretty much at capacity, but this past summer was a bit of a overload on the plan. And we wouldn't probably be looking to do that same volume of work, in upcoming years.
What do you do at the downtown?
You're right, but that'll be,
And then there's Highland.
that's not entirely our boat to steer.
But it took us years to get ahead of the road work.
Yeah,
And when I first became a town meeting member, we didn't think we could ever catch up.
Yeah.
So it takes time.
What might be useful is Like, what would the impact of like another FTE be in terms of capacity? If you said, let's gonna hire one more person, then they're gonna really focus on the backlog of sidewalks. Those are the projects they'll get every summer. And does it
Yeah.
make a difference? I don't know.
So because we don't actually perform the sidewalk rehabilitation ourselves, it's more of they have to prepare, like our staff have to prepare all the locations. That's where the majority of the work lies. And then once the contractor comes in, then it's a supervisory role. So adding another person would help on the super preparation like side of things, which is helpful. But like more staff will make our work more efficient, but typically the way we frame it is that more staff allow us to do work orders in addition to our plans and capital improvements. So we used to have 2 crews, and one crew could be dedicated to doing work orders and the other crew could be dedicated to doing the prep and overseeing the contractors and helping with the contractors. We don't have that any longer. We've been trying to get back up to that, but because of that, it's like we can basically focus on, do we do work orders this week? Or do we, if the contractor's here this week, that's what we have to do with put the work orders on the back burner. So having an additional staff member is kind of more helping us to get back to that point of having 2 crews. So it wouldn't necessarily help the larger sidewalk rehabilitation projects. Does that make sense?
It does.
Because the work orders a lot of times have to go on the back burner for potentially a month or 2 at a time while we handle our planned work. And then the fall comes around and we go back and start clearing out the work orders. Because people often forget that we're doing that in addition to these other large projects, so we currently with the capacity that we have, we basically do one or the other at a time. And work orders a lot of times will be, there's a crater in the sidewalk in front of my house, somebody has to go repair it. Or the curb broke on our street, things like that, smaller things, those things our staff can do by themselves. But 200 feet of sidewalk, the staff don't have the ability to do that.
Have you looked at the problem from the other side of it? Like, what would need to happen either from a staffing or funding resource perspective to fix this within X years?
So we've based it on the projections we've used in the past have been based on cost. Just taking the amount of deficient sidewalk, multiplying it by our current costs.
Yeah.
But that just gets to the budget question.
That's the budget question. That's not necessarily the capacity.
Yeah, so it's kind of a little hard to quantify the productiveness of an individual FTE and how that would benefit, like shorten the timeline.
Yeah.
But because we don't have a prioritization system in place, the line is not moving. There's no, it's not like, oh, we'll get to you one year and we'll get to you the other year, and then people want to jump the line. It's like, we just are, unless you live on a school walking route, we currently don't have a plan to rehabilitate the sidewalk in your residential neighborhood. And that's why this is the answer to that.
It also, there are people who want more sidewalk. So
Yeah.
after all of that, there are neighborhoods that are deficient with the sidewalk, that want a sidewalk. And so where does that fit in here?
Yeah.
As well. I know that at least one person has contacted me about a neighborhood, and the writing was on the wall for this neighborhood, I feel like, because it's a newer development that is pretty close to town, and like, there's like a clear gap in the sidewalk, so. Is there a way for, at least for like new funding to like get that from like subdivision development or like some other way, or like, I think it's like pretty obvious, these gaps that are there, that as people move into these areas, even though not a lot of them, but they need to be funded, they need to be there, so like, is there, after we do the sidewalk removal, like how do we add additional sidewalks to that plan as well?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a confluence of, so similar to like, to when we installed ramps. If we call the contractor up and say, oh, we just have a little section of sidewalk from this corner to this corner that we need you to do. They'll say, oh, I need more than that to make it worth my money to come out. So we have to co-locate with, we either have to rehabilitate the entire stretch of the sidewalk, maybe including some portions that are not, they're not necessarily in a state of, they're in poor condition. So it's kind of like, we would say, oh, this has been these people want a sidewalk. And this area over here, the other sidewalks, the next to their neighborhood, or, adjacent to where they're talking about, these sidewalks are in kind of poor condition. So if we have enough money, we'll have them do that at the same time, and just do the whole sidewalk in that one section, and then make the connection at that time. So if it's just a connection where there's like a block or two of, there's no sidewalk on this side, or like Moe Street, it's tough for us to get them to do just one piece.
So it's the
So-
length of the project too that really matters. So you have
Yeah.
one project, but it's a considerable amount of sidewalk. You can handle that with about the same staff.
Right, so that's why like when we're talking about the pilot location, why we said, okay, we'll do most of this neighborhood here. Because if we said, okay, we just want you to do the sidewalk from, this corner to this corner, the contractor will fight us and say that they're not making any money on that mobilization.
So let me ask that a slightly different way. If one option was the trade sidewalk program, the other option was we double our budget. If you were to go to that same neighborhood and say, we're gonna replace all your sidewalks, both sides, because we have the funding to do it, would you have the staff do it under our current staffing? Because it's one project, one vendor coming in to do it, or would doing extra mileage even in that sort of tight area necessitate more staff to support it? Because you do the prepping, you said, right?
So that should be fine, because if we have enough time to prepare, they're not going from one end of town to the other end of town, that's why we always try to
Yeah,
co-locate work,
yeah,
because it's easier for the contractor to do. In some cases, the contractor will, like I said, if it's not a big enough job and in a single location, we'll have trouble even getting them scheduled. But it's also beneficial for our staff too, because they can spend all day in this one neighborhood working on stuff, it's more efficient.
Yeah.
But the contractor essentially, for the purposes of this discussion, the contractor essentially has infinite capacity.
right.
Like, they'll put as many crews as needed
These
in
are
the field.
big giant firms.
Yeah, like they're not gonna, they would love if we were like, can you do every sidewalk in this, in this section of town?
Okay, that's helpful. to know.
But our staff, if it was spread out, that
You'd
would
be
be,
stretched too
we would
thin.
be stretched too thin, because we wouldn't be able to supervise them properly, we wouldn't be able to, it would take much longer to prep.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, if with the same staff, we could get more done, just if we had more budget and we focused and like flood the zone. That's a different approach.
Yeah. So I think it's worth pursuing the public feedback idea. community meeting idea.
Yeah, talk to Lee. Lee has a lot of experience with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, we can talk in this room forever about the different factors, but
Yeah.
if something is not gonna work from, the residents are gonna refuse, then it's not really worth something.
Right, you build a whole program up, and you get no hand raisers.
Yeah,
And not only that, you get a lot of hate mail.
right,
The
Yeah.
key is making them part of the solution.
Right.
yeah,
Okay, so we'll work on the.
so, yeah, so we'll work on, some locations. I think it makes sense to have kind of a couple neighborhoods picked out and then get their different perspectives before we poll or however we want to actually go into any one particular location.
Okay.
So maybe we start there and then we can start talking about what the format of that meeting would be and what information we need to gather.
We'll follow up with that.
So by the next meeting, I should have some information about.
Okay.
What is the next one?
It's one of the things. on
Yeah,
there.
we're getting there. We got one more agenda item before we go there. We'll make it quick.
Okay. Yeah.
So the next one is the Highland Ave tip project letter of support. And that is a letter from our committee, asking, requesting that the Highland Ave project be included in the Boston region's tip program. And you can, I can write that letter. With any input,
Do you motion?
any motion,
Yeah, I move that we empower Tim to write a letter in support of the TIP program.
I second that.
okay. And so we'll take a roll call vote. I vote yay.
Yeah.
No?
Yay.
Steve, Paul,
Yeah,
Duncan? On you.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Aye.
Okay.
I think,
So I did bring a copy of the plans for the project, but they are 10% designed so that there will be revisions. There's nothing too unexpected on the plans besides, the majority of the work of the improvements are focused on integrating a bike lane and then pedestrian safety improvements. So the exact form of the bike lanes is kind of the main sticking point for the design, the remainder of the design process. Because it's such a long stretch that in certain areas, one type of bike infrastructure is more appropriate, and then in another area that would not necessarily work. So one of the things that the consultant is planning on doing in the new year is holding putting together a survey and putting together a survey that will be aimed towards the cyclist community and then others that use, others that are interested, whoever, talking about the different types of infrastructure and which they would prefer in certain areas and what issues they might see. There's some things, there was some question about would people tolerate if, the bike lane went across driveways, things like that. Questions that they want public feedback on for people that bike around town.
Who's the consultant?
TEC,
What else have they done in need?
they did. So before I got here, we haven't worked with them on a major project in a little bit. They're actually also working on the bridge we were talking about earlier. So they're on that project. They were on our on-call contracts in previous versions, but they're not right now, so it's like they're dedicated solely to this project. But they're
Just curious.
pretty big firm, yeah. So basically, you know, you have like the more, the commercials, the commercial part of the corridor that runs, next to the high school. And then you have the
There's
more
one in the
residential,
Heights as well.
right? And then you have more of the residential section as you approach,
Has to be.
as you go to, yeah, as you meet up with the portion of the project that's already completed, or
Right.
the other project. At Webster, so.
Will they be looking at future use at 100 West Street in terms of how it impacts exits and entrances to that site? Is that something they would look at?
We did discuss it in our last meeting with them.
That would be helpful if they would,
Yeah,
if they can.
it's a factor. They've been doing a lot of traffic modeling and other things like that to see what the impacts would be. And they have to do that at every intersection along the corridor as part of the MassDOT sort of sign off on the project. So yeah, so like the different contexts affected, because, you know, we might be able to do protected, separated lanes in the more urban context. But then once we get up to the more residential area, that would be, there are trees, many trees that are in that path that would either have to be removed, or we would have to have the bike lane go behind the trees, and actually we need to have an easement taken for that entire stretch. Or,
That's if you're doing a protected bike lane.
yeah, or we go on street for that section and do some similar to, you know, with the flex posts and all that.
Is it theory that you're gonna have one lane, protected lane on each side of the street, or are you gonna try to do a 2-lane bike lane?
On either side, so this plan,
You just listed the first two alternatives as
I-
World War III.
I know.
and IV.
Well, that's why we need to do the. Well, that's why I was wondering, is there a possibility to do, if we just did bike lanes on one side of the street, that they're in both directions? Would it avoid that?
so are you talking about for the whole length of the project or just in that section?
I don't know if it's possible for the whole length, but I think that's one idea, is just you have it on one side of the street.
Very narrow.
Yeah, I think that
for the traffic.
the design is early, like we're still many years away.
Yeah,
And there's probably like a lot of conversation about the details. of
Yeah,
this in the future, probably from our committee, and elsewhere. But I think now, the letter that I'm gonna write.
Yes.
Is gonna be, I'm gonna take some items from our design guide, which are, you know, like an emphasis on safety and access for vulnerable roadway users. Planning, providing, you know, at least planning to provide a protected bike facility connections from the rail trail network, as an important part of, you know, that, you know, connecting Dover and Medfield to Newton. Much needed improved pedestrian crossings, including locations in the high traffic school zone, which are on here already, but and then design based on our future guide that has measures to eliminate deaths and serious injuries to Boston Region's Vision Zero plan. And the re-envisioning transit-oriented commercial centers around the region, which I think the project, we're not gonna be able to do any of it if we don't have the funding, or very little of it without the funding. So I think writing a letter of support is just that.
Yeah.
But the town's working with our committee, and these are the goals that we have, and hopefully that will end up in the project. And
Yes. Yeah, so basically, you know, the project aligns with our goals and the town's goals.
Right.
You know, rather than saying, we like this
Right.
one
Yeah.
section of bike lane, you know, I just wanted to give you some context on what is being developed right now.
Well, for what it's worth, if we can stay away from the removal of trees and easements, that would be good.
Let's first remain in compliance with the Needham housing. So I'm getting all
Only agent, only commission, town for justice, or as a select board come and then also write something.
So in this case, the mobility the way that the application asks for, so that's the other part of this thing. So, the application for, inclusion on the tip plan is due at the end of this month, so that's why we need to talk about this and get the letter ready. The application basically says your municipality's, transportation related body or something like that. That's what it says. So, and the consultant recommended that we talk as a group, so.
We'll draft that and send it over.
Yeah,
Great.
And then the next agenda item is future meeting dates. Second, continue on the second Monday. Does it still work for everybody?
Sure, we have a climate meeting.
Monday is a terrible night for me,
Monday, yeah, I mean, we've, I guess it's been a year, so if you want.
but I mean. So it's Tuesday and Thursday, so.
Yeah,
I just know that Wednesday won't work, and we probably shouldn't do Tuesdays.
No, you got
All
planning.
I
and
just want to make sure
select
we choose a different week.
Yeah, so Tuesdays are just like,
so
wow.
we're all, this is always the
board.
second
Yeah,
Monday.
guess it's gonna have to be Monday.
Seven work, you wanna move it to six, because it's late at night,
6 is fine with me.
6 is fine with me.
or six
Yeah,
better for anybody than seven?
I would be in favor of 6
I think
because.
to the extent,
I've been here all
seriously,
day.
to the extent that we can save town staff, having them
Absolutely.
spend the evening with us,
Yeah, sure.
that would
That
be
work?
good.
Always better. I could even go earlier if anybody wanted to go earlier.
Yes,
So
I
second.
think 6 is good.
second
what
Monday.
date?
Yeah,
You wanna get dinner before?
I wanna get dinner, I need to prepare for those meetings.
All right, fair enough.
So what day do you got?
So I guess we'll keep the second,
the second Monday, I don't think that.
The 12th? Or 13th? Let's see. Second Monday's the
13th
13th,
of
13th, yeah.
January. 10th of.
Democratic Town Committee, there you go.
This is more possible.
All right,
Alright. So 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Second Monday's going forward.
So we're just gonna schedule them out, put them on the calendar.
So I'll reserve us the room and send out an invitation, a calendar invite to everyone.
And we're gonna go back to Dedham Street,
Yeah,
so that's easier for you.
easier for me.
And then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
so move.
Second.
Okay, chair votes aye.
I,
Steve?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Duncan?
Aye,
All right, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you,
thanks,
Duncan.
guys.
is this 500 Dedham Ave?